live. Hello, everybody.
Hey
Seth,
everyone,
Seth, you're there somewhere, not
undisclosed location.
undisclosed location. All right,
I'm in
everybody.
a container ship somewhere in it.
A container ship stuck somewhere. Yeah, where we will not reveal yet where you are. Okay, I see some folks are starting to tune in from a few places. Yeah, as you're joining, let us know where you're watching from. Welcome to the Great Transition, everybody. Hello, everybody. Good to be here with you. Again, welcome to the Great Transition, whether you're watching us live or watching the recording. If you are live, yes, definitely continue to let us know where you're tuning in from. Yes. Hello, everybody. Hey, Tampa and DC. Uh, yeah, Utah. All right, Quebec. Hello. Hey, everybody. Okay, so yeah, welcome to the Great Transition. Today we're going to look at what is this phenomenon that, what does that mean? That one boat gets stuck in some canal and then our whole global trade network takes a massive hit. What is the purpose of this and the reason for this? Is there any spiritual explanation for what's happening in the world right now? Human beings, it turns out, are gradually becoming infertile, which is a frightening warning from scientists. We're going to look into that. We're going to, of course, employ the perspective of authentic Kabbalah, through which we can understand the deeper driving forces behind all those things. And we're going to try to put all of these events into the context of this great transition that we are all going through in the 21st century, beyond all differences of religion, politics, culture, wherever you are, whoever you are. We are going through a process of transition, a global awakening, a global shift together, and that's what we're trying to understand here. So yeah, Seth, just start us up. How do we begin this
It's
jam?
for people engaged in the wisdom of Kabbalah. It was a very important week, a
Oh,
week where a unique group of people with a lot of valuable things were trying to get through a very narrow passageway in Egypt.
right.
So it turns out that about I don't know, 15% or something like that of all of the goods in the world go through a literal bottleneck, um,
Right.
the Suez Canal. So it takes you, instead of going all the way around Africa, you kind of cut through that passageway there.
Mm.
And as everyone knows, probably, um, there was a ship that got stuck in there this week. And what happened? This ship, so the ships used to be smaller, obviously. The ships have grown like 90%. Literally, the ship that got stuck in there this week was, you do meters, so I'll tell you, I converted to meters for your sake, of about 400 meters long. It was in, for anybody who does feet, that was about 1,300 feet long. It's a quarter mile. It's 4 football fields
Mm.
long, is the size of the ship. And
Yeah, talk to me in football fields. That's a lot.
okay,
That's
so
easy.
yeah, so that's better than meters. So it was about 4 football fields long, and on these, so we don't eat off of the farm in the backyard, and grandma doesn't knit sweaters for us anymore. Everything that we wear, our phones, our computer, my
Mm.
backpack, my shirt, everything, my glasses come from somewhere in Europe, my shirt came from somewhere in, who knows, in Asia somewhere. My boots came from somewhere, everything comes from another place,
Right.
and it's moving around the world. It mostly moves in containers that you see on the back of tractor trailers, moving around. And then they figured out, well, why are we sending a ship across the ocean with, 50 of these things on it or 100 of these things on it? Let's put a lot more things on it.
Mm-hmm.
When they start, it's like a domino effect. When they start putting so many things on a ship that's so big, that ship gets priority. All the smaller ships now don't get priority. So all the smaller ships that were still working are now, actually, there's all kind of ports everywhere else in the world, like Miami, Boston. I'm sure over there, I don't know the names of the cities,
Hmm.
all these other cities popping up and making ports for these smaller ships to go into. And so it's like a cascading effect here. In order to get the ships to go through, this ship draws like 50 feet of water,
Mm.
like underwater. It's about 50 feet deep. In order to make a canal that deep, they have to dredge. So, for example, in Florida, when they're doing the dredging, they're like ruin the coral reef, which of
Mm.
course has to do with fish. I mean, everyone's ruining the coral reef, not just the dredgers, but I'm saying all of these things have like cascading effects. So,
Right.
just the fact that there's this one big ship here, there's all of the problems of not being able to get our crap, not being able to get our new computers or our cows that were on board, or I don't know how many animals were actually on the ship, but
There's like thousands
because
of animals as well as all kinds of mechanical gear,
they're
right?
so in the process of preparing for the show, I was doing some reading some articles on this. There's been thousands and thousands of animals that were slaughtered. Anyway, they were going to slaughter. They were prematurely slaughtered. They were going to be
Mm.
eaten. They couldn't be eaten because they weren't able to arrive where they were going for all different reasons. Like some countries didn't want to take animals or whatever reasons.
Mm.
So they ended up just taking them somewhere and just killing them without them getting eaten. I don't know if it's more humane if they would have been eaten, but anyway, but the interesting thing about all these stories is how one dimensional they are. How
What do you mean by
everyone
one
looks at like,
dimensional?
means like we look at the one thing that we see in front of us, like, oh, we need to get a bigger ship in. All right, let's dredge. We don't see like how many things are affected by it. We're
Right.
okay, we're going to build a bigger ship here. We don't see what's going to happen to all the smaller ships and how it affects all of the other ports and all those things. So anyway, um, a giant ship the size of 4 football fields was going through a very narrow passageway. And you know what? The story is of why it went off course was wind.
Wind.
Wind was wind
Wind.
blew it
Wind like wind or
like a
waves?
windstorm,
Okay.
sandstorm,
Okay.
blew it off. Okay,
Mhm.
and then the trick to that it actually where they were able to free it. They had tugboats and all kind of engineering and stuff, but the force, from what I see, that they were able to free was actually the moon. When the moon lines up at a
Mm.
certain time, which it does twice a month, at the new moon and the full moon, it affects the tides in a certain way, and the
Sure.
tide ran a certain way, and by
So
using
so
that
they were
force of
waiting
the
for
tide,
the right tide to help
I
free the
guess someone
boat.
figured. I guess someone figured out that um, there's greater. Yeah, it changes the tide, and someone figured out, let's
Hmm.
exploit nature. Let's use that to our advantage because tugboats by themselves weren't working, and that's how they finally were able to free it. So, Asaf, let's look about it. Oh, okay, interesting stuff. Very interesting, and we could talk about all the socio-political things. But what's really interesting for us is to see how uh, it's becoming more and more clear. Like first we saw with the virus was super clear how the whole world has one problem now.
Yes.
We always thought like what's going to unite the world. The
Hmm.
whole world had one problem. And then we see from an example like this, it's just coincidence, for example, that it happened during this week. This week is this holiday of Passover through Egypt. Maybe it's just a total coincidence. I thought it was funny,
Hmm.
but that uh, that all that something like this can affect so many people all over the world, like what they
Yes.
can eat, what they can
Yeah.
wear,
Yeah.
what the it's it's as if like one switch now affects 20% of the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
corona switch affects the whole world.
Yeah.
This switch affects 20% of the population. And um, what's really interesting is that what it means if you flip that thing on its head, the effect that one person then has on the whole system. If you flip it
Yeah.
upside down.
Well,
So, and
that requires like already like another step to get there, but quite easily we can see how one boat. You know, one boat stuck in a canal has a major effect on the entire global trade network and global economy ultimately. Yeah, and you related it to COVID as well, but okay, what is this?
We might be
Okay,
too late. We might have
missed the boat.
missed the boat on that one. Wait, okay, so you at least have to see the Putin one. This is too good. 1 second.
Okay,
Let me get it. It's too good.
so Chris is in.
Hey,
Chris is
Putin
into
saved the
me.
day.
Okay, Putin. So Putin saved it.
This
Okay.
was actually this didn't make the news. All right, so you got to see this one too. A massive global economy covering the entire planet with billions and
Mm-hmm.
billions of participants. Who would win? That or a sideways boat?
There you go. There you go.
We're
Exactly.
seeing it. We're seeing
Yes.
what's happening. And you just
It,
needed to actually, you really just needed a little
this
WD
one's
40.
this one's
Check,
funny.
check it out. And then Chuck Norris really. If at the end of the day, if nothing works, then Chuck Norris. There you go. Okay, that's all we got.
But the yeah, these are funny. But the one second to last or something. The one where it said, like one ship going sideways stuck in a canal can like basically screw your whole economy. That tells you the level of interdependence and the level of such a closed integral system that we are now living in. This is totally 21st century. This is totally something that did not exist 100 years ago, even, right? We were never so globally interdependent.
So there's a question. Is there some spiritual reason why the world is becoming interdependent?
Right. So now we're going. All right. So let's get into it. So yeah, we look at the world. I would say it like this. We look at the world at if you look at as a historian at what's happened in the last 100 150 years, you'd go, humanity has become so interconnected, but it's because of the globalized economy, it's because of trade and commerce, it's because of the information revolution, this communication network, the internet, GPS, satellites, all of that stuff, right? That has made the world interconnected and interdependent. But I would say, yeah, that's just on the surface. There is a driving force behind this picture that we're seeing. There is a force that is inherent, embedded in human evolution that is causing us to become more interconnected in our economy and
I
politics and
wonder
media and all
an
that.
an
Yeah.
interesting thought would be if you took out all of the excess
Mm-hmm.
from the boat, from that
Okay.
boat, um, or from the global economic trade. If you just took out all the excess, like how
Mm.
much would be left, and like what's driving all of this international connection and all of the countries to be connected and trading with each
Mm.
other is just like I'm wondering, it could be just like stupid crap, like more toys, more junk,
It
like
it for sure
more.
is. It for sure is. I mean,
So like it's not like
you
it's
I mean, a lot of it is food, of course, and there's necessities and clothing and all that. And there are some gray areas where you can say, what's a necessity and what is necessity and surplus is something that is very dependent on culture, right? And that's why it's going to be hard to say what was actually necessary. But if you would just look at human, basic needs, what does a human need to keep surviving? There's definitely, 90% of what was on that chip was probably not for human survival. You know.
so
Yeah.
then what's forcing all of this interconnection
Mm-hmm.
between all the people? It's just this I need, I need, I need in the
Mm.
form of junk, but there's some like undescribable urge inside of people that is causing the economies to develop and global trade routes to develop, but it's not like something that's critical for our life. It's not like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, all of these things developed because we needed to get water from here to here. Like we solved water.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
certain places
Gotcha.
don't have
Now I
water, but
see.
I'm
I
saying
see
in
what you're saying.
general, I mean, the places that don't have water, it's also probably for reasons of greed because there's certainly the science and the engineering and the money to bring water there. But most of this, like, it comes from this, like, unconscious, these unconscious urges inside of people. Just I want, and they don't even know why. That through these desires,
Yeah.
global networks of trade are set up, and all of
Yeah.
this happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like there's I would say there's two conflicting trends that we are looking at. We're looking at a growing, when you look at the last 100 years of human development that have brought us to the point where, one ship stuck in a canal now means the whole global trade network takes a major hit. How did we get here? So there's two conflicting trends, or a growing conflict between two opposite trends. One is that our drive to get more out of life and to conquer, and own and consume and fill ourselves with something more, with more and more and more. This ego drive of the human, why didn't dogs develop like such a global trade network? So there's the ego drive that keeps growing and growing, and then on the other hand, there is uh, um, our inevitable interconnection, our inevitable interdependence that is also growing, right? So now we're at a point where these two are culminating. The clash between them is culminating, and you're getting to a point where you can't stop the growth of the ego, and you can't stop interdependence, and that leads us to some gridlocks. And we're seeing this very clearly in politics. We're seeing this, very clearly in how difficult it is for us to vaccinate all the people, and so on. We're seeing this in even a situation like this where a boat gets stuck, and then our whole system, a huge part of it becomes paralyzed. The
What's the
Yeah.
purpose of all of this?
Yeah, the purpose is what we should really be focusing on. The the Let's go back to basics here for a second, right? So Kabbalistically, we look at humanity as one collective entity, right? This single collective soul, you can call it, this non material entity that holds all of human desires, holds all of them as one thing. Now, from before the material world, before the Big Bang, that entity was unconscious. It was just created, and it was in perfect adhesion with the force that created it. From the moment the Big Bang began until, 14 billion years later, until the 21st century, everything that has happened was just this collective entity gradually becoming aware of itself. So you, me, and everyone else we're all pieces of this collective entity, and we're not going to get into all the details here, but we were shattered into many different pieces, and now we're gradually starting to recognize that we are actually pieces of the same thing, the same one created being, the same one collective entity. And that appears to us, it manifests, it takes the shape of human beings building global trade and global networks of communication and the internet and global media, and we're becoming very dependent on each other. Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been better if we all just had a garden in our backyard and grandma continued to knit the sweaters? Isn't that
Well,
more natural? Isn't that more
sounds
in
better.
touch with nature? Isn't that more
Sounds
in
more
touch with
fun.
nature?
Yeah, sounds easy enough. Sounds
No, but I mean, if there's a plan of nature and we're
yeah.
supposed to be in harmony with nature, then enough with the chemicals, enough
Yeah.
shipping oil around the world,
Yes.
enough with polluting the oceans on these big ships. Just put a garden, can't we get there by building a garden in the backyard?
Yeah, the problem is that, nature wants us to be not just in balance like the ocean or like ants or like birds. Nature wants us to consciously own and decide and volitionally go for that balance with nature. So this means we have to start from just being aware of how opposite we are to this program of interdependence that exists in all of nature. And then we can start being conscious and participating and deciding about our faith to become in balance with this whole system. So, the interdependence that we're seeing now, the only reason we're noticing it, because what's changing, right? What the laws of nature are changing? The laws of nature are immutable, right? And they don't change. So what is it that is changing? Why does humanity today appears to be a lot more exponentially more globally interdependent than it ever was? Why are we noticing that we are more and more like a global village? We're noticing because we are changing, because human consciousness is evolving. And while we can't put the finger on it and we can't exactly say what it is, we're beginning to feel like threads that are connecting us. We're beginning to notice that we're like cogwheels in a single machine and we can't move without any effect on the whole, without having an effect on the whole system. We can't, we're starting to see, oh, COVID. Oh, wait a minute. The whole world is now affected by this global pandemic. We've had pandemics before, but never a globally connected one because the world was we never felt so connected across the globe. Oh, there's a boat stuck in a canal and it influences, what did you say, 20% of the whatever the
15 per 12%, I don't know, something.
yeah, so
but
so,
but
so
but 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 it's but hold on. It's it's not, that's what I meant by one dimensional. It's not just the one boat or whatever, the one canal, because then
mm,
if that backs up, it affects everything else.
yes.
And if those goods aren't getting to where they need to be going,
Hmm.
then those people are not able to produce what they need to produce, and it really it spreads like wildfire. So it's not just the
Right.
one factor.
So I don't know if that's where you want to go, but what it
No,
brings
I
up
want to.
in me,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No,
is
tell me.
that we've built all our systems, all our economy and our politics and media, everything. We have um, we've built systems that allow us to try to take more and more, benefit from this world, right? Like you can, like you said, I have a shirt that comes from Asia, I have like whatever that comes from wherever, this is enabled by this global economy and global distribution network and so on. But the more interdependent we become, the more we're going to see that we're going to have to not just build systems, mechanical systems outside of ourselves, but we're going to actually have to change our own mind about our connection. We're going to have to change our mindset. We're going to have to think about each other differently if we want to actually live beautifully together in this interdependence. That's the one thing that we haven't even started doing. You know what I mean? Is that where you? I don't know if that's where
Kind
you
of.
want.
P. Marlin has a question, a comment question. Evolution of the ego and the endless search for fulfillment. Our own interconnection grows. Wait, okay, I'm not sure what this endless connection of our endless search for fulfillment of our own interconnection grows alongside of the ego. When we do the inner correction, it fixes the collective. So my correction is our correction. I think she's pointing to um, the, the ego growing
Hmm.
alongside the global interconnection. Okay, thanks, Chris. Evolution of the ego and the endless search for fulfillment of our own interconnection grows alongside of the ego. Okay,
How do you
so
understand
the
the question?
it
I don't
means
think I
that
got it.
means that alongside our interconnection, our
Yeah.
ego is growing.
Right, right, exactly. Yes. Yes, exactly. These are two opposite trends. Look, back to couple of basics here that can really give us like a broad a bird's eye view on what is happening to humanity in the 21st century. Um, we are one thing, but at the beginning of creation, we are unconscious. All of creation, although it is one collective being, all of us are part of this one collective being, we don't feel any of it. We don't feel it at the very beginning. Now, we have to go through a process called shattering. Without getting into the details, at the end of that process, we start developing in the material world. And there we start discovering, oh, after like 200,000 years ago, some monkeys start feeling that they go down from the trees and they start developing as human beings, and then they start questioning, how to have a better life, and they start, they have survival instincts, so they come together in groups and they start making their own food and they learn how to harness the power of fire, and then yada yada yada, Suez Canal, both get stuck and someone doesn't get his iPhone, right? So what is happening there? Two processes are happening. These creatures are beginning to recognize that they exist in and of themselves. We are beginning to become self conscious. We feel so self conscious like no other creature on the planet. This kind of self consciousness takes us to the point that we feel separated from the program of nature, from the wholeness and interdependence that exists in all of nature. We, in our minds, we feel like we're in isolation from this whole program. We need to build our own life on this planet, and we need to get along with nature to the extent that we can have a better life. We need to use nature and consume nature, but we're not part of that. We don't feel inherently connected, instinctively connected to that wholeness and harmony of all of nature, to that program of interdependence. That is what we call in Kabbalah the human ego. We feel separated, a conscious sense of separation from the rest of reality and from each other. This happened throughout evolution. We weren't that way 200,000 years ago. At first, we were just like, a pack of wolves or a pack of monkeys or a pack of whatever, social species, instinctively connected. Oh, we can survive together. We can cuddle together, keep ourselves warm, whatever it is. Then we grew in our consciousness and in our ego. And this consciousness of the ego means that we feel less and less dependent on each other,
In
less and less
every
connected to nature. Yeah.
in every forest, there's not some species of birds who just decides to, you know, I'm going to have 12 kids, or I'm going to have what, like,
Mm-hmm.
the forest keeps a certain amount of a certain kind of bird, and the same with the ants, and the same with the squirrels. And in every ocean, there's always a certain, the ecosystem and the natural environment and the way everything works together. They
Mm-hmm.
keep populations at a certain level, and they work symbiotically. Through this process of going from those monkeys up to where we became now, our population increased um, exponentially in the last 100 years or something like that. It's went from like apparently 2 billion to now we're close to 10 billion. So it's so out of
Yeah.
touch with nature. It's actually super ironic that the thing that caused the boat to go off apparently was wind, and the thing that freed the boat was the moon, like the tide.
Hmm.
Like very very natural things,
Hmm.
very very ironic, but that we are so off balance with our system. The next thing we were talking about was the sperm count issue. By just developing, increasing the population, just eating. We talked about like excess. If we took everything that was excess off of those boats, what would be left? Like one of the contributing things to the whole sperm count thing is decreasing. So if anyone doesn't know, and we can kind of segue between the two stories here because I see a lot of overlap, that sperm count and sperm concentration has declined by about 50% in the last 50 years.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we read the same article about this, but I saw a really scary title that said by 2045, humans may just become completely infertile. Like that's like insane. Like in 24 years, people are not gonna be able to have babies. That's basically what some scientists are warning us about right now. Yeah, maybe Chris can bring it up.
You
The
can almost you can almost imagine. Yeah, bring it up, Chris, if you have it. You can almost imagine in the future, kids like looking to their parents and being like, "Babies came out of a person? That's so weird. That's so gross." Um,
you're
but
talking about a future where
well, I mean,
babies are,
if the sperm, you
yeah.
would have to you'd have to use science. Every baby would have to be a science baby. Yeah, assisted reproduction there. You grow the baby outside. But so what I was saying is that from all this excess,
Hmm.
like when a person fat production, like when a person is overweight,
Hmm.
um, then that body produces more estrogen. Okay, when
Hmm.
we take cholesterol drugs because we're fat or whatever, cholesterol is what goes into producing testosterone.
Mm.
So all of the non-stick stuff in our pans, the stuff that makes plastic soft, plastic bags, water bottles, basically all of the things that we're using constantly, all apparently contribute to decrease in. There
Yeah,
you
there you
go.
go. Humans are
Okay.
rapidly losing the ability to procreate. This is the one I saw. Humans are rapidly losing the ability to procreate. Scientist warns the world is on track to be completely infertile by 2045.
Okay,
So,
so who knows who's behind this article, but all of the fertilizers that they put, the chemical fertilizers they put in the grass their kids play in, these things affect it. Um, like I said, the cholesterol blockers. I know my dad takes cholesterol blockers. He doesn't
mm,
need to have any more kids, but it that also um, blocks
so,
decreases the testosterone.
mhm.
The stuff that makes the plastic soft, they give it to rats, and then if those rats have male babies, those male babies have lower testosterone. Same thing
Mm.
with humans. So okay, so I guess the question is, if we go back, we were at 2 billion.
But wait, we you see, this is on the face of it, it's like, wait, how are those things connected? What does that have to do with the process that we were talking about? But it's exactly that,
In my
because
mind, it was all connected.
yeah. Okay. Okay, go ahead, just go
No,
for it.
no, say.
No,
It
I
was just in
mean,
my mind. It
okay,
didn't get to my
we were
mouth yet.
talking we were talking about one aspect, the growth of the human ego, how we've become so consciously separated from nature and from each other. But there is another trend. There's another trend that starts happening later on in the evolution of mankind, where we begin to feel that our egos are actually interlocking with each other and with nature. We can't grow anymore as individuals on this planet. And in order to get more out of life, more out of nature, we have to start becoming more dependent on each other. And then we develop global trade and finance and commerce and media and politics, and everything becomes more global. And then you reach the 21st century and Suez Canal and both stuck in the canal and all that, right? So the other trend of interdependence is what's causing us to begin to feel that we're also dependent on each and everything in our environment and each and everything that we each do in how we produce and our industry and everything. So so now you look at the situation, at this warning of the scientists with the infertility and everything, and you go, okay, so we're actually discovering that we depend on the plastics that are at our disposals and what we
All
do
the
with
stuff
them.
that's in that
And
boat, all the
yeah.
stuff that's on that boat is the stuff that's making us infertile, pretty much.
Yeah, there you go. Here's the connection. No, it's really, we laugh at it, but it's so true. We are just starting to recognize the law of interdependence. It's a law of nature. Nothing exists in isolation. No system exists on its own. All levels of nature are connected. The inanimate, the vegetative, the animate, and the human, they're all one system. And there are ripple effects and butterfly effects across the whole integral network on all levels. Just like in your body, all the cells, 50 or 100 trillion cells, whatever it is they say today, they're all connected, even though they're very different cells in very different
Should,
systems, doing
should I
very
be
different functions. Yeah.
should I be spiritually concerned if the population decreases back down a few billion? Do I have to worry spiritually about something like that?
Who said it's a bad thing? Who said? I mean, this is another point. Nature is so, we have no idea how nature works. This is the funny thing. I mean, I don't want to diss or reduce
You don't want to diss
the
anyone who's into 10 billion people, but
no,
just
no,
saying.
no. I'm saying I don't want to disregard all of our science and the earth scientists, and there are people who obviously there's the we've learned a lot from the last whatever 1,000 years of science, and yet we know nothing when it comes to how nature really works. And so to think that, if the population grows or if the population decreases, then it necessarily means good or bad respectively is just a lack of understanding of how certain things work. These are the areas where when you look at a whole system and you look at it from a limited perspective through a limited egoistic natural view that we have, we might think, oh my God, this is really bad. This is really scary. This is a bad thing if people are becoming infertile, right? It's like the instinct. Maybe it's a good thing. Who said nature is not, doing its thing to bring things back to balance? Look at how much this growth of human population polluted the world, and all those millions and millions of people that are, just fighting for survival. Millions of others in other parts of the world are depressed. Who knows if maybe maybe the kind of balancing act that is happening right now includes within it also a decline in human population. Again, I'm not saying it's the case, but I'm just saying we can't judge how nature works through our limited point of view.
Is
You
there
know what I
is
mean?
there some connection between the quantity of people and the quality of the spiritual action? Is there anything in that to deal with? Is it
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
good it's a good
it's
point.
you're right. I mean, looking at the population now, I mean, it just seems like the amount of, for every person that's born,
Mhm.
like the amount of suffering in the world increases. It's
Yeah.
like
hmm
um
Well, there is a
but
connection. There is a connection. I mean, obviously, everything that we're seeing in this world is a manifestation. It's like everything you see on your computer screen is at the core of it is information. It's lines of codes that are producing the images that we're seeing. And similarly, what we're seeing in our world, including human population boom and bust, that has to do with deeper causal spiritual processes as well. And you can say that the growth, the huge growth in human population from say 1 or 2 billion to 8 billion or almost 9 or 10, whatever it is today, right? That had to do with a period of time in which the growth of the human ego had to happen, and therefore it had to be distributed across more individuals in order for it to go through a process of spiritual correction or spiritual transformation. Complicated processes, but without getting into too deep into it.
Open it up a little bit more.
Okay, so we said there's one. Kabbalah explains that we're all one collective soul, right? So this soul, what's the point of it going through this material world? Why do we need the material world? Why does it even exist? Like, why is it? What's happening here? We are going through a process of calibration of our conscious perception, meaning we start from a state of unconsciousness, that's before the material world, and then through the material world we have the ability to begin to become aware of ourselves, become conscious, and then grow this consciousness ultimately to the point that we can climb back to a spiritual state where we are all one collective entity.
What's the matter? Why not just stay as one? Why do we need to go to 8 billion?
Well, why
billion and then 8 billion?
Because just like a baby stays in, if it stays in the womb, it can have no consciousness of itself and no awareness. And you can say it exists and it's in balance and it's surrounded by warmth and love and harmony in the womb that's completely taking care of it. But do you remember how it was like to be in the womb? No, I don't remember either. None of us remembers because we had no consciousness. That was the state of the collective soul before the material world. So in order for the collective soul to become aware of itself, conscious of itself, this created being, this humanity, ultimately it becomes humanity, it has to be separated from that womb of creation. It has to be separated from that oneness with nature, and then
that's
grow.
What's experienced as all the problems and all those things.
Everything. Yeah, that's everything that's happening right now in our world, right? But, and so, so how does this spiritual entity play out in the material world? So every person, every human being contains a spark of that entity. Now, how do you do the math between, that's basically what we're asking here, right? Like, what's the calculation here? How many bodies do you need to experience this thing we call spark? So we're not going to get into, it's way too complicated for us to understand all these processes, but in general, when we see a growth of human population, it means that more of us that as if share the load, the burden, or the work, or the process of this.
We're talking about one soul, so it doesn't matter if it's 2 billion people, 100 million people, or 10 billion people. It's still one soul.
Yes, exactly. So what makes it so why do you sometimes see 1 billion people in the world and other times you see 8 billion people in the world? Because for the sake of this correction process, this growth process that the soul has to go through, it might need to distribute its sparks across more and more corporeal processes. But it doesn't mean that we just need to keep growing. It's possible that we will go through a more qualitative process that will require from, for, I don't know, 20 years from now or whatever, we'll need less physical bodies. The bottom line is there is one collective soul, and we all get to experience it, to enter that realm and obtain it. And it doesn't matter how many. For nature doesn't care about the amount of bodies. It's just whatever it needs to happen just happens. So that's the deal. I hope that's
Julie has a question. She says, "Is the next spiritual state corporeal?"
how do you understand the question?
Um, I'm not sure because spiritual is not corporeal. Corporeal is not spiritual. I mean, you could say everything is one, and when we have a spiritual perception, we even see the roots inside the corporeal reality. But I'm not exactly sure what she means. Is the next spiritual state
Yeah,
corporeal? No, the next corporeal state will become spiritual. I think that's more like it. We won't we get to a point where through all of these things we need to emotionally feel our interconnection. That's basically what
yes.
all of this mess is about.
And
All of
go ahead.
no say.
I'll add it
I
afterward.
like when
It
you
was
explain it. Okay. All of these messes are so that we um, what compelled us, like we said earlier, what compelled us to use the plastics that made our sperm count go down? What compelled us to want crap to fill boats to go around the world? Like, it's the same nature. There is yeah, help me out here.
okay.
I
No,
too many doors open at the
yeah,
same
there's
time.
a
I
lot
don't know
a
which one
lot
to
of
pick.
tangents here. Here's one. There's a lot of tangents we can go here. One of them is this. The this is something that, is very controversial for someone who is not
My
well
favorite.
well versed in the wisdom of Kabbalah. And it sounds, of course, very
This is one of the
weird.
things I was about to say. I'm sure this is what I was going to say.
It sounds very weird and delusional even, but when you think about it deeply, it makes all the sense in the world. And it's this corporeal world doesn't even exist. That's that's the thing. It doesn't exist. The only way to understand correctly what we are going through is to understand that our perception is evolving. That's the only thing. And our experience currently, how we feel ourselves and reality, how we feel each other, how we feel our existence right now is a material perception. It's a material kind of level of awareness, it's a very crude, very inaccurate, very blurry sense of what exists.
Let me ask another give another super crude example without any hard evidence to present this to someone. But when people, for example, say, do aliens exist or do aliens not exist, right? I would, first of all, without even answering the question directly, I would
that requires its own show, it.
You're right, and one day we'll do it. But I would first just spend a bunch of time going over the visual spectrum and explaining that there's so many waves of light that we don't see. The visual spectrum is a tiny slice of the full amount of light that can be measured and perceived.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're trying, and that goes for all of our senses, imagine a giant ocean and take one tiny slice of it, and that's like what we're perceiving as our reality. So if you're saying, for example, it's a crude example, but we're just giving crude examples now to paint this picture about what you said, that this reality doesn't even exist, the physical reality. If you're looking for like an alien in like a sandbox, but if your perception was not just that little sliver, if all of a sudden you could see all of the light,
all the other frequencies,
you would see so many forces. They're called angels. You would see so many forces operating that you can't see at all, because you're only seeing a tiny sliver in a sandbox right now. So what are we talking about? We're talking about fuel and fish. I eat fish and I kill a cow and I eat a
Yeah.
cow and I take cotton and I shear a sheep. Our whole life is so crude. Everything is
Yes,
like so
exactly.
crude.
Yeah.
And the things we're talking about, the spiritual reality is so fine.
Yeah, and we can see from physics too that, the finer the force, the more invisible a force is, the stronger it is. Like, think about like a even like you can see it from nuclear bombs, as opposed to, other kinds of bombs, right? Of explosions. The 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 deeper you go into reality, the less material it is. Even with the example you give, that's just the visual spectrum as well. What about our thoughts? We have thoughts. We live with our thoughts all the time, and we have no idea how exactly they are formed and how they're generated. And if you would see the process that leads to you having a thought, you would go, you know, where is, what are all these forces? Are these alien forces governing creating
Oh,
my thoughts? You know what I mean?
thoughts
Yeah.
filled those ships in the Suez Canal. It's like all of a sudden a person has an urge, he wants some junk, and then it sets into motion a whole process of dealing with materials
Hmm.
of mining things out of the rocks to make to get lithium out or to get whatever out to build something. And so some thought, some urge appeared and put this whole process, this whole gross, not gross like disgusting, gross like
Yeah.
physical
Yeah.
process
Hmm.
into motion. But if we could understand, like you said, the same way that the thought is a tiny, I mean, the visual spectrum that we see is a tiny sliver, the thought process is, if instead of taking
Exactly.
every thought and saying this thought and landing it into a phone, or this thought and landing it into a jacket, if we could take the thought and perceive the spiritual roots of it, it's we enter into an endless world. We
Yeah.
enter into, because what we're doing is every thought, every desire, every urge, we're like dragging it all the way down into some matter, right? But if we make a vessel for it inside in our emotions, then we can start to perceive it before it clothes down in here, and then you start to perceive a whole other thing. So anyway, what does this have to do with ships in the canal and decreasing sperm count and one
Yeah.
soul? Where do we go?
All right. All right. We need to. I would try to kind of wrap it all like this.
Please do.
We have to reach a state. It's embedded in our spiritual evolution. There is a purpose to this whole trip. There is a purpose to all of this journey. And the purpose is this: that from an unconscious state, a collective, a single entity that does not feel its own existence, from that state, we go through a whole process where we think we are material beings, that we live and die, and we are 1 billion people, then we are 8 billion people. We think we are building all kinds of machinery and the industrial revolution, and we think we are creating networks of communication and information, and gradually what is happening, we are actually discovering who we are and what we are. And when we start recognizing the very first degree of recognizing our interconnection, our inherent, our inner connection, not all of those external connections and interdependencies, like the Suez Canal and our dependence on how our sperm count depends on plastics or whatever. All of these external dependencies, and COVID, they're pushing us to discover that we are internally one thing, that we are actually parts of a bigger collective. And that collective is what we truly are. This collective soul is what each of us is. We discover that we are merging into one. There's a Chris, can you pull up this Baal Salam quote? There, this one's gonna help. There you go. This is a beautiful one. Very, very profound. The entire collective resides in each and every individual. Just think about that sentence, right? Like all of humanity, everyone and anyone that ever existed, the good, the bad, the cruel, the ugly, the beautiful, whatever you think of them, they're in you. All of humanity, they reside in each and every one of us. How does that work? Because ultimately, in the end of our development, that's the end, the complete awakening of our consciousness, all the souls will merge into one as they return to their spiritual root. This is the whole process that we're going through here. We're going back to just understanding who we are and where we are and what we are. And the entire journey the whole world has been through in all of these 14 billion years of evolution and whatever, how many years it's going to take until we awaken spiritually. All of this journey that the whole world has been through must pass through each individual soul as well. So yeah.
In the same way, all of the money, all of the tugboats, all the steel and oil couldn't free the boat the same way that the natural force freed the boat. So all of our fighting for freedom and fighting for justice and fighting for this and fighting against drugs and fighting for all of these things of building big buildings and amassing all of this wealth. In the same way, nature will do the action for us. The same way that the moon, if we just understand what nature's doing, we can ride with that force, and it's way more powerful than all the tugboats, all of the oil you could use. It doesn't make any pollution. So for us to just start to understand the process we're in and how the system works, it starts to free the boat without even deploying any steel, without deploying any capital. Just when we begin to emotionally understand what system we're in and what forces are working on us, the boat begins to become free and starts to flow with the whole system.
Yeah, nature's gonna push us. When we say nature, also, it's not just the trees and the planet Earth. It's the deep, profound program that runs everything that manifests in our world as well. So that program,
you gotta help me out here. Renee is having a hard time here. She thinks that we're she's gobsmacked here. She thinks we're evolutionists, and we don't believe. I think she totally misunderstood everything we've been saying this whole show. Do you want
to? Which is good. It's part of the process. It's okay.
I'm gobsmacked.
No, but do you see a question there that we can clarify?
She says, "You believe in evolution. I respect that, but I don't believe anything like you do." And she said something else about Christian. Yeah, definitely got confused by.
And
I'm not sure.
And rightly so. It's confusing. Rightly so. There's several processes here that we're talking about. Okay, we got maybe 2 minutes here. I'll try to do
explain the whole thing in 2 minutes.
Explain the whole thing in 2 minutes. Look, we are going through a process in our world. Some biologists call it evolution. Other people believe all kinds of things. From a Kabbalistic perspective, what is happening in this world is, evolutionarily speaking, is very similar to what the scientists, are describing. Meaning, yes, there was an evolution of matter that gradually created conditions for biological life. Then biological life emerged and developed and branched off to different kinds of species that, through all kinds of mutations over millions of years and selection processes, some remained, some didn't remain. Ultimately, we evolved. Human beings evolved as a species that its ancestors are those great apes and so on. The Ari, the great Kabbalist from about 450 years ago, even wrote, which is, by the way, maybe 100 years before Darwin, wrote about how the ape is an intermediate evolutionary degree between the animal and the human level. So this is something that, if you just look at the material, his history of what happened in this world, then you can say, yeah, Kabbalists agree with what the evolutionary biologists are saying. But that's just on the surface. That's just what our eyes can see, so to speak. Kabbalah explains that the entire evolutionary process is encoded into a program that already contains all of the states that needed to unfold. So we are now not evolving randomly. Evolution is not a random process, and that's very different from how some scientists will argue or will look at it. Evolution is a purposeful process. It is the unfolding of predetermined information from potential to actual. The bottom line of this program is what Kabbalists refer to as the thought of creation, meaning there is a guiding thought, there is a guiding intention, there is a guiding purpose that guides all of evolution. And the thought is very simple: to make a created being that can rise to the status and level of where it's connected with its own creator. This is a state which is the final purpose of our development, and it's called in Kabbalah adhesion, a state of bonding, of attachment, of conscious connection with the force that created the created being. So that's what we can do in the in 3 minutes. Let's just get there. Let's just get there together and bring all your questions to the next show. Throw your questions in the comments, maybe, and then we can continue to clarify. But confusion is part of the process, by the way, in Kabbalah, right, Seth? How wouldn't you say so?
Definitely. Yeah, Renee, just hang on. You'll hear things that sound completely opposite from each other from 1 week to the next.
And then
Safi did amazing today.
And then they'll make sense all of a sudden, and then they won't make sense again, and then they'll make sense again. All right. Thank you for being with us, everybody. We are. Are you gonna play a song? Who's gonna play a song for us?
Chris has got something queued up.
All right. See you next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Between walls, and it's time that the curtain falls. With one smile and one tear, with one word, the whole world hears. Overcoming any situation, and together brushing off